special guest for this segment. He is, I believe, the only internet reviewer that can be found on OnlyFans. He is the reason I have not done a Garfield retrospective, because he beat me to it. It is our hope to one day do a full review series on Desperate Housewives one day. Please welcome that long-haired creepy guy himself, J.I. O'Fallane. I sincerely hope I pronounced that name correctly.
Not even remotely, but that's okay. It was actually a pen name, but never mind.
Well, we'll go by nicknames, at least for this segment. So yeah, it's been a pretty busy time period for you. I understand you've moved up to the Great Northwest where it rains all the time.
Oh yeah. Cliff Notes version, or I think that no one calls it that anymore. Gosh, I'm old.
Yeah, we're old.
Too long didn't read. I had been a caregiver for like 13 years, and then I ended up losing my job and where I was living in the space of like 5 minutes. I found that out like in the same conversation.
Ouch.
So I had to like sell what I could to scrounge up the money to drive all the way out to the Pacific Northwest. I lived in Portland for about a year, and now I've moved to Seattle, where I actually like Seattle a lot better, which is interesting because, growing up, in the 90s, I heard like a lot of, after the backlash of grunge started, I did, all you ever heard was bad things about Seattle. But honestly, I think it's kind of great here. It's got a lot of cool stuff to do. And I also got a new job recently, which has actually kind of been my dream job. I'm working for an airline company now, and it's pretty awesome. That's also why I've been kind of quiet, on as far as internet activity for the past year and change, is because I've had a lot of stuff go down.
Yeah.
In a relatively short period of time, but things are picking up, and I'm really excited to be here because I actually, to give some context, I have a bunch of older sisters, and so Sweet Valley High was one of those things that was just kind of on the peripherals of my, of my, I guess, childhood and early teens, because I didn't read the entire series from start to finish, but I remember that, if I came across a book, if it was just lying around, or if I was in the library and they had some of the books and I had time, I would definitely pull one down and check it out because, damn, this series was bonkers.
Yeah, I was about to segue into this for what we are going to be discussing here. So, full disclosure, I personally never was a reader of Francine Pascal's Sweet Valley High book series, nor its predecessor, the Sweet Valley Twins. Of course, I was definitely aware of them, and I was an avid reader of the Sleepover Friends series, so I myself do have some experience, reading a book series that might not have been exactly marketed to my demographic. And also, I will point out for anyone watching this that yes, I am aware there also was a Sweet Valley High TV show back in the 90s, and yes, I do have plans to making a review video of that one of these days. Just be patient with me. It's been on my list for quite some time. But yeah, when I first began making hints about this particular list I found, you made it pretty clear that at the very least you apparently do know a little bit more about these books than I do, because I only recently, upon finding this list, discovered that apparently the Sweet Valley High books were a little bit, what's the nicest way to put this? Knocking farts!
Yes. I remember all the controversy about Twilight, and and for the record, I'm not saying that, there weren't concerns there, but looking further back, I actually think Sweet Valley High was way more coconuts than Twilight ever got. I have not perused through this list yet because I wanted my reactions to be as genuine as possible.
Okay.
And I am very, very excited and keen to know which plot lines got got made it to the list, because I know for a fact that there were way more. There was like a long list of crazy that
I'm
went on
gonna say this,
book
like
series.
yeah, there's 12 entries on this list. Now I'm gonna might as well get this out of the way right now. I'm actually not going to be reading these in the exact order that the list provides them, just because there's a stretch of 3 straight entries on this list that are so absolutely nuts. I'm surprised they weren't saved for last on the list. I'm going to save them for last on my reading, and I got a feeling, Creepy, you've got a pretty good idea what those are. Just
yeah, if you're insinuating what I think you are, then this is probably the most. Then this will be like this is the most infamous of the Sweet Valley High stories, because whenever people start talking about this book series, especially in terms of it going off the rails, they tend to point to this one. It's not the only example by far. I mean, this is a series where we go from teenagers having a social war over who gets to be on the pep squad to the twins fighting a werewolf.
yeah. So, with that and having been said, let's start getting into this. This is a list that was published on mentalfloss.com. Back on, the publishing date is April 2nd, 2017. So this actually is a few years old. It was written by Aaron McCarthy. Just want to make sure I get all proper credit on this thing. Here we have 12 of the Sweet Valley High books' most ridiculous plot lines. Many of the Wakefield twins' adventures in Francine Pascal's Sweet Valley High series are typical teenage stuff. Young love, drama at school, difficulty at home. Sometimes, though, the plot lines of the SVH books were, in a word, bonkers. Here are a few of our favorites. Note, it's impossible to cover every ridiculous thing that happened in these books, so some information has been left out. For more complete explanations, check out Shannon's Sweet Valley High blog. There's a link to that in the article here. Maybe we'll talk about this someday, but in the very least, let's start with, Elizabeth's best friend is paralyzed in a plane crash, then is quickly unparalyzed. This is from book number 20, Crash Landing. Enid, Elizabeth's best friend, is dating George, who just got his pilot's license. He takes her along on his first solo flight, where he plans to break up with her so he can date a girl named Robin. But before he can do that, the engine dies and the plane crashes in a lake. Enid saves George, but in the process hurts her back and is paralyzed from the waist down. George decides not to break up with Enid while she's hurt. How nice of him! Enid gets an operation on her spine and goes to the school dance in a wheelchair. As she watches George dance with Robin, she can tell they're in love, which of course bums her out. A few days after the dance, Liz invites Enid over and asks her to watch a kid named Teddy while he plays by the pool. Teddy falls in, and Enid is able to stand up, jump into the pool, and save him. She can walk again! It was all part of a plan hatched by Elizabeth. Teddy was her accomplice. Liz receives a standing ovation at a restaurant for so brilliantly orchestrating Enid's recovery. Enid, meanwhile, decides she just wants George to be happy and sets him free so he can date Robin. Okay, first off, I got to say this because I just realized this reading this off right now. This is basically almost a plot line. I don't know which books got published first, but I think Miss Pascal may have actually stolen this plot element from Christopher Pike's Final Friends book miniseries. I don't know if you've read that. Those.
Oh, actually, I have. I was a big Christopher Pike fan, back in the day, and I still have a certain nostalgic fondness for it. And I do remember the scene you're talking about. At the very least, I feel like Christopher Pike's, that revelation was a little bit more plausible, because it is explained later that the reason why the person can walk in that book is because they had experimental surgery done on their spinal cord, and that their spinal cord wasn't severed, it was just bruised.
Right.
It was her spinal cord was bruised, so there was damage there, but it wasn't like the doctors revealed later there was a possibility that she might, recover. And so they did some surgery. It was a success. She had to go through rehab and so forth. And that, she had been keeping this a secret because she had been hoping to kind of shock the killer into confessing. Not the most brilliant idea, but I guess I can kind of understand where the idea might have, like if you didn't have anything else to go on, you could at least try that.
Yeah.
So the reveal in that book was slightly less stupid. Although I will say that this is a prime example of the fact that it feels like Sweet Valley High doesn't know how
medicine works.
I almost want to say anything works, but medical science, at the very least, does not apply to these books. Like, there's no, they don't know how amnesia works. They don't know how head trauma works. They don't know how drugs work in Sweet Valley High. People can drop dead from like one drug use, and I mean, just an experimenting with drugs is fatal, in these books. So the fact that they don't understand how paralysis works, I mean, apparently Enid's paralysis was just psychosomatic because of a plane crash trauma. I guess we'll go with that one.
Well, we've already started off with a plot device that may have been stolen from a Christopher Pike book. How about we move on to a plot device that may have very well been stolen from either Boy Meets World or Rescue Rangers? Jessica joins a cult! From book number 82, Kidnapped by the Cult. Jessica gets grounded for her awful grades for 3 weeks. On her first day out, she's annoyed when her boyfriend Sam plans to go to a dirt bike race instead of spending the day with her. She goes to the mall to mope, where she meets some kids from a group called The Good Friends. They tell her that they too used to be sad and mopey until they met Adam Marvel, who took them in. They invite
that sounds like a D-list Marvel character right there.
Isn't that supposed to be the antagonist of Guardians of the Galaxy 3? I'm gonna get comments for that one. Anyway, they invite Jessica to dinner, and it's not long before she's sucked in, ditching her flashy clothes for more subdued outfits and helping the group collect money for charity. Even when Jessica finds out that the Good Friends isn't donating that money to charity, she still can't be convinced that the group and Dreamy Adam Marvel are bad. Concerned that Jessica is in over her head, Elizabeth poses as her sister and infiltrates the Good Friends, where one member, Susan, tells her to get out while she can. Not long after, Adam tells Jessica that Susan left and the group is going to move on to another town. He wants her to come with them. Jessica packs a bag and goes to the Good Friends' house, but hesitates when Adam asks her to get in the van with the rest of the group. Just in time, Sam, Elizabeth, and Todd, Liz's boyfriend, show up to stop her. Sam finds Susan, who's actually an undercover reporter, bound and gagged in the Good Friends headquarters, and Todd has called the police. Adam is arrested. Everything returns to normal. What do we exactly call normal in the Sweet Valley High books world?
This is normal. I want to go ahead and point this out right now. I've heard this in your videos before. You make reference to how much of a Benji Snoopy is in the Charlie Brown specials. Elizabeth Wakefield takes the cake. We haven't really dived into it yet, but both of these that we've covered so far, give a good indication that Elizabeth Wakefield, I think, is like Francine Pascal as a as like some sort of Mary Sue version of herself as a 16-year-old teenager. Because like Elizabeth Wakefield does no wrong, like ever, like at all. Elizabeth Wakefield exists to just be the hero in every situation and get applause for it from everyone around her.
And if what I've already seen, not just from these some of these entries, but also the handful of episodes of the TV series I watched, she basically has to turn Jessica into a flat-on supervillain to balance that out, it seems.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, like, there are people who don't like Jessica very much. I've seen fan sites that, say some pretty awful things. But I mean, like, there are plenty of people who don't like Elizabeth either because they kind of find her. Well, I mean, like, people give like Jessica crap for being manipulative, but Elizabeth is really kind of just as bad. It's just that she just does things, to get her. She does things to get her way in a way that will, like, they both do things. They have different processes for doing things that will get them applause, basically.
Okay, well, actually,
Jessica wants to be the popular one. Elizabeth wants to be seen as the superhero.
Right. Okay, well, I think you actually alluded to this one earlier, just before we start up things. Let's move on to. Now, this is a two-parter, actually, but we'll start with Liz falls in love with a werewolf from number 104, Love and Death in London, number 105, A Date with a Werewolf, and number 106, Beware the Wolfman. The twins head to London for one of their many newspaper internships. Murder victims keep popping up with their throats ripped out, and the twins are put on the crime beat to investigate. Okay,
that's the thing you want two teenage girls to do.
Yeah, but exactly my point here. Though she's still dating Todd, Liz goes out with a co-worker named Luke Shepard, who manages to convince her that werewolves are real. Jessica starts dating Robert Pembroke. His father, Lord Pembroke, is a werewolf expert. He also owns the newspaper where the twins are interning and has been suppressing stories about the murders because he believes that Robert is the werewolf. But it turns out that it's Luke, not Robert, who is the werewolf. The product of an affair between a woman named Annabelle and Lord Pembroke, he's been blacking out, dressing up as a werewolf, killing people, and framing his brother for the crimes, which we later find out from his diary. There's a climactic fight between Luke, Robert, who has a silver bullet to kill the werewolf naturally, a cop named Bumpo, and Renee, a friend from when the twins went to France on spring break, who's interning at the French embassy for the summer and has been following Elizabeth to protect her. Luke is shot, his werewolf mask falls off, and he dies. Did I just read a Mad Libs entry on Sweet Valley High?
Yeah, basically. Actually, that's not too far off from how these books were written. I got very curious about like what went on behind the scenes as far as the book series went. Apparently, it's ironic that Sweet Valley High became a TV show because that was originally how it was pitched. Francine Pascal conceived it originally as a television show that was basically going to be a soap opera aimed at teens. Keep in mind that this would have been like in the late 70s or something like that, like before 90210, the original 90210 show made it, network executives realized that was actually a lucrative market. But when that didn't work, she turned it into a book series, and she had a team of ghostwriters. Yes, yeah. An entire team of ghostwriters, and that's how like one book could come out every month. But she would basically write an outline of each story, and how she wanted it to go, and then just basically have the ghostwriter fill in the blanks and do all the heavy lifting. And so
why am I getting
not only was there a process going into creating this show, but they had to plan like many books in advance, ahead of time. So they can't even argue that, this was just one person writing on the fly and putting down whatever popped into their heads. Yeah. They planned this in advance.
And if we need any further proof, let's go on to what is essentially part 2 of this. And Jessica dates a vampire.
I was waiting for this one.
From number 126, Tall, Dark, and Deadly, number 127, Dance of Death, and number 128, Kiss of a Killer. At the beginning of this miniseries, Jessica is digging through a dumpster looking for a diamond earring when she discovers a man's body in the trash. There are bite marks in his neck, and his body has been drained of blood. The next Monday, a new guy starts at school, tall, dark, and handsome Jonathan Kane. Before long, SVH's entire student population, minus Elizabeth, has gone majorly goth, dyeing their hair black, painting their nails black, dressing all in black. You get the idea. So really, if this book series had taken place in the 90s, it would have been any big deal.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Jessica decides that she wants to date Jonathan, but he ignores her. Jessica usually gets what she wants, though, and she's incredibly persistent. She gets a ride home from him, then later shows up at his house. He kisses her and tells her she should have left him alone. There's lots of making out and him telling her she should get out before it's too late. Sounds an awful lot like the plot of another vampire series, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The writer's words, not mine or yours. But yeah, as if you were not kidding about saying other things before. Jonathan decides he cares too much about Jessica to hurt her, so he invites Enid over instead. Jessica interrupts them, figures out what's up, and gets mad. Jonathan is upset, but also relieved because he didn't really want to kill Enid. Meanwhile, other people keep dying, including a girl named Katrina who sucked dry during a party at Jonathan's house. When Enid goes to visit her grave, she's attacked and is in the hospital for the next week. Jessica continues to see Jonathan, who Liz has figured out is a vampire based on some books she found at his house. She tells all the SVH kids, and they believe her. When Jonathan takes Jessica to his lair, a cave on the beach, Liz and Todd come to save the day, an angry mob on their heels. Jonathan turns into a bird and flies away. Vampires are real. The end. And of course, as we all probably figure out, some guy by the name of Joss Whedon read this book and got one idea after the other.
Oh yeah. You know, again, these three books. You feel? Are we talking about Sweet Valley High or Twilight?
I mean, like I said, this could be Buffy even. Yeah, but yeah. In the meantime, just now, they didn't have, not for what it's worth, obviously this book series didn't have to go full-on supernatural in order to be bat insane, as indicated by our next entry. Students search for treasure and are attacked by convicts in the desert. From number 115, The Treasure of Death Valley, and number 116, Nightmare in Death Valley. Liz, Jessica, Todd, Ken, Bruce, and Heather win a contest to go camping in Death Valley for 4 days with limited supplies. Why anyone would enter a contest to do this is a mystery. While hanging out near
the 80s, they didn't have Wi-Fi back then.
Yeah. While hanging out near a mine shaft, one student turns on her portable TV and learns about some convicts who have escaped a prison. Meanwhile, Liz discovers a satchel full of gold nuggets, plus a map and a diary that discusses the treasure of the scorpion in the mine. The group decides to hunt for the rest of the treasure and are all soon carrying around their own bags of gold nuggets. When the kids set up camp for the night, Jessica's bag is stolen from her sleeping bag. She thinks Heather did it, but it was actually the 3 escaped convicts who capture the kids, tie them up, and steal their gold. The kids manage to escape, but then they notice that one of the convicts is being swept away by a flash flood, so they rescue him. He turns out to be not so bad, but his buddies are pretty awful. They drag the kids into a cave where they decide to kill them. The nice convict gets shot and dies. His killer leaves the cave, telling the other convict to kill the kids. Jessica convinces him not to do it, and he also leaves the cave. But not before firing 6 shots into the cave's roof, which collapses, trapping the kids. They take a path that goes deeper into the cave, and eventually they begin to walk through rapidly rising water. It gets up to their necks, and they all think they're going to die. Then, miraculously, the water recedes. They realize that the cave walls are shale, so they kick and punch the walls away until they come out near the rendezvous point and head back to Sweet Valley. The kids are disappointed to learn the gold was pyrite and the map and diary were fakes from a movie set. Okay, Creepy, you said earlier that Francine Pascal originally pitched Sweet Valley High as a television series. I'm reading this storyline and thinking, this probably wouldn't have flown for an animated Saturday morning cartoon series from the 80s. It would be considered too knucking futz.
Yeah. I feel like I saw something similar to this. The mistaking pyrite for actual gold at the end, that twist, that's something that sounds very familiar. And, the convicts, the kids trapped in a cave, all of these feel like, we're just dinging through the plot points at this point.
Well, anyway, let's go. I guess we can move to something that's at least a little less deadly, perhaps. The twins become nannies for a royal family. From number 132, Once Upon a Time, number 133, To Catch a Thief, and number 134, Happily Ever After. The Wakefield twins are very experienced babysitters, but who knew they were good enough to nanny for royalty? They travel to France for a month to be nannies for the de Saint Maries. Liz, who was dumped by Todd for the summer, and Prince Laurent fall in love, but he has to get engaged to a horrible countess's daughter. Jessica, meanwhile, is canoodling with Jacques, a guy she met on the train from the airport who claims to be a duke's son, but is actually a jewel thief. When Jessica wears an emerald he gave her, which was stolen from the countess whose daughter is promised to Prince Laurent, to a ball, the twins are thrown in a dungeon. They're not there for long, though, before they're rescued by their royal charges. The twins run into the woods and hide out there. Laurent's parents tell him they can convince the Countess not to prosecute the twins if he agrees to marry her daughter, and he says he'll do it. Meanwhile, Jacques finds the twins, and they convince him to confess to being the jewel thief. Laurent asks Liz to marry him. She's so taken aback she can't answer right away. Later, Jacques' father comes to the castle and convinces Laurent to help him break his son out of the dungeon. Jacques and his father go free, Elizabeth turns Laurent down, and the twins head back to Sweet Valley, where Liz reunites with Todd. Happily ever after, indeed. Except for Laurent, who must now presumably marry that awful countess's daughter. So it's like, this is like, I give him credit, this is almost like this could be Sweet Valley High, the Disney series.
That's true. Yeah, it feels that, or it feels like a more action-packed episode of The Nanny. So, I find it interesting that this is actually one of the less coconuts storylines in Sweet Valley High. Teenage sisters who are twins travel from California to Paris, to France for a month. I'm assuming Paris because, in young adult literature, it's always Paris.
Of course.
But one falls in love with a prince-to-be, another falls in love with a jewel thief, and apparently everyone is like the most eloquent speaker ever because there's a lot of convincing going on, towards the end.
Yeah. Well, let's just get right back into the more insane things. And we have Elizabeth is almost murdered by her boss. From number 129, Cover Girls, number 130, Model Flirt, and number 131, Fashion Victim. The twins get an internship at a fashion magazine called Flair. I am resisting the urge to make woo jokes from hearing that title. Liz's supervisor, Leona, tries to steal her idea for a column called Freestyle. Liz tells the editor-in-chief of the magazine, but Leona accuses Liz of being the one to steal the idea, and Liz is fired. You'd think that Leona would feel pretty secure in her job, having eliminated the potential source of trouble and all, but instead, she goes to extremes and tries to kill Liz, first by hiring someone to run her off the road, then by aiming a gun at her in the Flair offices. But before she can pull the trigger, the police show up and she's arrested. Hope the column idea was worth it, Leona! So, man, we thought The Devil Wears Prada was an insane storyline.
Yeah. And they managed to, this feels like a single book idea from the way the description takes it. They managed to stretch this out for 3 books.
Yeah. Already getting a mind flips to another TV series that I'll bring up later talk. But in the meantime, if we think that one crazy murder attempt was enough, let's move on to Liz is held hostage by a guy with a bomb from super thriller number 4, Deadly Summer. The twins are working at Sweet Valley High News, where they learn that a man named Donald Redman has escaped from a psychiatric hospital. Liz is assigned to find out about Donald. She discovers that he was a Sweet Valley High student who kidnapped a classmate he had a crush on. Later, he plants fake bombs at the local movie theater and the high school football stadium, shows up where Liz is babysitting, and then starts to believe that she's the same girl he kidnapped back when he was in high school. Donald is building
glasses.
Yeah. Donald is building a real bomb in the utility closet at the football stadium when Liz and Bruce show up to have a talk on the tennis courts. Not long after, Liz's boyfriend Jeffrey shows up, pretty angry that Liz and Bruce are hanging out. Liz wanders away from the guys and is grabbed by Donald. Jessica and Lila figure out that Liz is in danger, first because they're told by a Ouija board they've been using to trick Liz into thinking Bruce has a terminal illness is triggered by Jessica's twin ESP, and second, after Donald's sister comes to the Wakefield house to tell them Liz is in danger. They call the police and then head to the football stadium. There, the police tell Donald to give himself up, but he won't, so Jeffrey tackles him, knocking the remote control out of his hand. Bruce runs away with the ticking bomb. Jeffrey tells Liz to smash the remote and take out the wires, which she does. The timer stops, disaster averted, right? Wrong! A few seconds later, they hear an explosion. But it's not Bruce who was blown up, it was Donald who grabbed the bomb from him, ran away, and died when the bomb exploded. Okay, I'll take books that were clearly written before Columbine for 500, Alex!
Yeah. So there are one or two, like at one point, Liz and Todd did break up, I think. Like there's this whole weird kind of thing between Liz and Todd where like they're basically that one couple from high school who break up and get back together again, you know, and you just wish they'd get over each other. But there's also like for one thing, you know, like an escaped mental patient is convinced that a teenage girl who is obviously much older than he is now is the same girl that he kidnapped who knows how many years ago. But the real thing that I want to bring up and point out, yeah, apparently the twins are telepathic. Some of the time anyway. Like it's one of those plot elements that where it kind of feels like the writers, and I'm definitely putting emphasis on the plural there, the writers just kind of forget that that's a thing sometimes, because if these articles are any indication, the twins are in danger all the time, like constantly. They are danger magnets. Their mutant power is that disaster finds them.
Well,
they are living embodiments of a hellmouth, and they draw They draw mad bombers and people impersonating werewolves and vampires and crazed fashion magazine supervisors to them at every turn.
But let's put out that it's not just, apparently it's not, if this might not just the twins that do this, this might actually be a hereditary thing. Because next on the list an old classmate tries to steal Alice Wakefield's face from super thriller number 8, Murder in Paradise. Being prone to finding yourself in perilous situations must run in the Wakefield DNA. In this super thriller, which was published in 1995, Mama Wakefield Alice wins a trip to a paradise spa. She brings along the twins and their best friends, Enid and Lila, whose mother also tags along. Enid's mom can't get off work. The owner, Tatiana, is disfigured, and there are no mirrors at the spa because inner beauty is all that matters, according to the spa's staff. Tatiana hypnotizes Enid, making her believe that her mother doesn't love her. Later, one of the staff members confesses to Alice how much she wants to leave but can't. Soon after, she's found dead in the steam room. Then, Alice disappears. Liz goes looking for her and gets pulled into a cave where Tatiana is waiting. She spills her evil plan to get plastic surgery to look like Alice and then kill her. Tatiana, we discover, is an old college classmate of Alice's, who was so ugly that the students, including Alice, called her Tatty Mule. When she was 23, she got plastic surgery, but the surgeon was so terrible that Tatiana was disfigured. She started the spa and took in runaways, hypnotizing them and practicing her plastic surgery techniques on them. But before she can pull off her dastardly plan, Enid, Lila, and Jessica show up and save the day with the help of some of the staff, who come out of their trances just in time. Tatiana is arrested, and the staff is free. What a happy ending!
I'm not gonna lie, I love this storyline. Like, there's just, like, okay, that's not how hypnotism, plastic surgery, help me out here because I feel like this list is longer. You know, there are so many. That's not how anything works, and yet I just kind of adore just how bonkers this book is.
Well,
it seems like the best Sweet Valley High storylines are the ones where they're not even trying to be realistic, where they just throw all logic out the window from like on the 90th floor and watch as it splatters onto the sidewalk at the bottom. It's just, you know, like the best ones are the ones that just are so utterly ridiculous that they become hilarious and funny.
Oh boy! Oh boy, did you say all of that, because, ladies and gentlemen, it is time. Like I said, I put off these for very last. And I said this earlier, that, of course, we've talked about this before, Creepy, that you have suggested that one day we should do a review series on, of course, the Desperate Housewives TV series. Which was, even I will admit, is about as bat insane of even a primetime soap opera can possibly get. Well, Creepy, let me just tell you this, that these last 3 entries that I'm going to bring up, this is not just a series that I think is too insane for Desperate Housewives. I dare think the writers of Passions would look at this storyline and thinking, this is too screwed up. Let us start with Jessica spikes Elizabeth's punch at prom, Liz drives drunk, crashes, and kills Jessica's boyfriend. From Manga Edition number 2, A Night to Remember, number 95, The Morning After, number 96, The Arrest, and number 97, The Verdict. Elizabeth and Jessica are both vying for Queen of the Jungle-themed prom. I want to start this, get this out of the way right now. How many dances and school functions does Sweet Valley High actually manage to put together in a single school year? Because it seems like they've got like 24 every semester. But
time is a weird soup in Sweet Valley High because despite being juniors in high school and 16 years old, the twins have multiple birthdays, Christmases, summer vacations, and they're still 16 years old and in high school.
And keep in mind, the series itself was them supposedly growing up and moving past the original Sweet Valley Twin series where they were junior high kids.
Yes, exactly. And they had to create an entire new series called Sweet Valley High Seniors just to make it clear that they're seniors in high school now.
Anyway, so yeah, vying for Queen of the Jungle themed prom. It's not just the title at stake, the winner will get a trip to Brazil. On prom night, Jessica wants Elizabeth to lose, so she spikes her punch with booze she charms from another student. Elizabeth gets drunk and withdraws from the race for Queen, and Jessica wins. After a commotion is caused by some uninvited kids from a rival school, Liz and Sam leave the dance together with Elizabeth behind the wheel of the twins' Jeep. They get into a car accident and Sam is killed. Over the next 3 books, the Wakefield family deals with the fallout. Elizabeth, who can't remember anything about the crash, is arrested and spends the night in a holding cell with a prostitute. She's eventually released, but is charged with involuntary manslaughter. Jessica, who wants Liz to go down for Sam's death, alienates her from her best friend Enid and manipulates Todd into making out and going on dates. Liz has nightmares about someone who looks just like Jessica but with dark hair who is trying to kill her. More on that later. Eventually, Elizabeth goes on trial. The defense doesn't have much of a case because Liz can't remember anything, but then, on the last day, a surprise witness named Gilbert comes forward to say he was out drunk driving that night and caused Elizabeth to crash. In the most unbelievable twist in the story, Liz, who was in fact driving with a lot of alcohol in her system, is acquitted. Jessica's role in the whole affair isn't revealed until a few books later, when Liz has a number of dreams about the prom that show Jess spiking her punch. They eventually make up, despite the fact that Jessica is clearly the worst sister ever.
Yeah. I feel like, when these things came to light, there should have been an intervention and maybe getting Jessica some professional help or something.
But wait! We are not finished with this, because let us move on to a doppelganger plots to murder Elizabeth and take over her life. From the books, number 95, The Morning After, number 96, The Arrest, number 97, The Verdict, number 98, The Wedding, number 99, Beware the Babysitter, and number 100, The Evil Twin. Margot, like the Wakefield twins, is 16. She's plotting her escape from her foster home in New York. Margot sets the house on fire to kill her foster sister, who saw not just the money Margot had saved up, but also the bus schedule Margot was reading, and takes off for Cleveland, where she gets a job as a nanny for a wealthy family. Eventually, she drowns the boy she's been nannying for, steals money from his parents, and heads to California, where she thinks her real family lives. For some reason, the bus Margot is on heads to Houston, where Margot gets off and sees a newspaper with a photo of Elizabeth on the front, along with a story about her trial. Realizing she looks just like the girl on the newspaper, Margot comes up with a plan. Kill Elizabeth Wakefield and take over her life. Never mind that this plan doesn't make a whole lot of sense if Elizabeth goes to jail. This chick is crazy. Margot heads to Sweet Valley, where she goes to the mall and buys a blonde wig. She befriends a dirt bike rider named James, who she pays to win a competition Jessica is putting on in Sam's memory. He regularly gives her information on the Wakefields. Margot, meanwhile, kills a server at a catering company so she can get a job there and work the Fowler wedding, the better to observe the twins. Then, she begins posing as Jessica and Liz regularly with their friends, boyfriends, and parents. This all culminates with Jessica, Liz, and Margot fighting over a butcher knife in the Fowler's pool house. Margot is pushed through a window by the older brother of the little boy she killed in Cleveland. She framed him for the little boy's death, but he's been tailing her across the country. Her jugular is slashed by glass, and everyone thinks she's dead. What did I just read?
Yeah, these books culminate some of the what fans call the Margot storyline, just to be succinct. And like I said, this is the storyline that when anyone starts talking about how Sweet Valley High went off the rails, this is usually what they point to as far as the best example of just how utterly bonkers and confusing this whole series can be.
But it gets better! My final entry on this: that crazy doppelganger has a twin who is also crazy! From Manga Edition number 6, Return of the Evil Twin. A year after the events of the Evil Twin, Nora, Margot's twin, shows up in Sweet Valley to seek revenge for her sister's death. But guess what? Margot's alive! She managed to overpower and presumably kill the paramedics who took her body away and hid for a year spying on the Wakefield twins. These crazy twins hatch a plot to kill both Wakefield twins and take over their lives. They begin posing as the twins with their friends and boyfriends, with the main goal of making the twins hate each other, just like they did after the Jungle Prom. Eventually, Nora goes to the Wakefield house and kills a sleeping Jessica. Later, she finds that Margot had kidnapped Jessica and was posing as her, sleeping in her bed when Nora got all stabby. Nora killed her own twin. Jessica is alive and is saved by Elizabeth's heroics. Nora gets arrested and all returns to normal. Again, what in the heck of Sweet Valley qualifies as normal according to all this? Like I said, I read the Sleepover Friends book series. And if I remember correctly, the last book I ever read, the girls in that series got caught up in a caper where some guys were trying to smuggle a manatee out of the country or something like that. That was about as insane as that book series got for me. And now I read this list and saying, you know what? It must have been the best thing in the world to be a YA novelist in the 80s and early 90s, because you can apparently write any damn thing you want!
Yeah.
You said it. This was supposed to be a teen soap opera series that Pascal originally pitched back in the 1970s. I mean, I'm not even sure this could make it onto Days of Our Lives. And Days of Our Lives had a plot where one character got possessed by Satan.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't that the soap opera where they had to do an exorcism at one point?
And remember, the guy who wrote that storyline went on to become the creator of Passions.
I was gonna say, yeah, it was the big friction as far as that storyline went was that a lot of people felt like it wasn't bad, it was interesting, but it didn't feel like it fit within the context of the rest of the soap opera. And I just said those words out loud. They came out of my mouth. Because of that basically planted the idea in his head of creating Passions, which, is a soap opera that seesaws back and forth between feuding families and small town drama, and a bunch of centuries old witches who apparently have it in for this one girl charity, and who, they just, for whatever reason, really, really want to die.
Well, it wasn't just that. If I remember correctly, Charity also had a twin sister.
Oh, yeah.
By the name of Grace.
Yeah. Because of course she did.
And I still have to like watch year 2 of Passions, but for what was hinted, those two sisters, Grace and Charity, basically might have been the inspiration for Supernatural. If what I've seen that was hinted was true, but yeah, this man, I never would have imagined that something. And I'm willing to bet at the very least that the Sweet Valley High TV series never got this crazy.
It did not. There's been some debate and contention over that fact that the TV series actually toned down the books because they took out the supernatural elements that would crop up. I don't think the twins in the TV show are ever described as having like a psychic link with each other. I mean, if it ever does come up, I think it might have been brought up like as a joke, but I don't think it's ever actually a plot point. And there's also the fact they took out like the really insane plot lines, like some of the stuff we've been discussing. And like I said, there's some contention over that. Some people like the more, I use this term loosely, realistic air quote storylines, and some people actually feel like, and myself included, that when you take all that stuff out, the show is actually pretty damn boring.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet there wasn't a lot of times where the girls had actual attempts on their lives during the TV series.
That might have come up a time or two, but it didn't come up with the same frequency that it did in the book series, where death is just constantly lurking outside the Wakefield home, staring into the windows, with binoculars and being like, one day.
But yeah, there we have 12 of the Sweet Valley High books, the most ridiculous plotlines. You know what, Creepy? I'm gonna give you a chance. Is there anything from this series that you can think of that didn't make this list? That just shows how absolutely crazy this series could have gotten.
Yeah, I did want to bring this one up because I didn't see it on the list.
Sure thing.
I don't know if it's like, I mean, like, it definitely doesn't hold a candle to the Margot thing, but there was this one storyline, and I'm trying to remember exactly where, at what point it occurred. But like, there's a guy that Jessica like sees once, and just instantly falls and head over heels in love with. And I want to say this one took place around Christmas time, too, just for the record. But, like, she falls in love with this guy, but there's a problem. He's actually engaged to be married to someone else. And I want to say that the girl he's engaged to is, like, an heiress. She's got money, like, her parents died and left her a fortune or something. I'm rattling that off the top of my head, but since it's Sweet Valley High, they're like, there's a bigger chance of me hitting the target on here. But the wedding comes, like, they date each other, behind the scenes, and then the wedding comes, and of course, when the minister gets that line that no one actually ever says out loud anymore for good reason, because this kind of stuff can happen, Jessica stands up in the middle of the church and makes a love confession to this guy, saying that he can't marry this other girl because, she's in love with him, and he reveals that he's in love with her, and it's this huge shock and scandal for some reason, because at this point, I feel like for Jessica, this is a Tuesday. I'm
almost certain this.
Then it goes into. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say this. This almost sounds like this could have been a 1990s romantic comedy starring Julia Roberts.
Yeah, true. But then there's like, things get weird. Again, not as weird as the Margot thing, but like, the fiance is like brokenhearted, but then later on, like, I think it's Elizabeth, because it always is, walks in on them, and they're like locked in an embrace, like they made up, or they were never actually broken up to begin with. And apparently there was this whole convoluted plot for the two of them to get this guy, get Jessica to fall for this guy so that they would get married, and then they would kill Jessica off, and then they would somehow have access to the Wakefield money or something. And like I remember it just being this really, really weird mess.
Yeah, all I have to know is that when something like that wasn't crazy enough to make this list, I guess
Also,
that
I want to point.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, just about to say that just shows you how insane the entire series could be.
Yeah, and I want to say just another thing to point out, like Jessica, like this guy was legal. It was like legal marrying age, and Jessica is supposed to be 16, so he was in his 20s, and he professed in front of an entire church that he had fallen in love with a 16-year-old girl. And the big thing that everybody focuses on is the fact that he was engaged to marry someone else, and not the fact that he's like 4 or 5 years older than her.
So no one's there to pull a Dr. Doofenshmirtz, she's 16 on them.
Yeah, pretty much. That's something that people point out a lot. The Wakefield parents are really, really bad at their job of being parents.
When Heinz Doofenshmirtz is better, that says a lot.
Well, like people point to Joyce Summers for, like having questionable parenting skills. Joyce Summers is way more on the ball than the Wakefield twins' parents are. Like Joyce had at least, been through a divorce. Her daughter had been locked away in a mental institution for a brief period. They had to move to a new town and start over. And so Joyce was just trying to, for things to be as normal as they could. And the actress who played her has actually said, like when she was a teenager, she did things that her mother had, like never found out about. And so she's of the opinion that a part of raising a teenager is just living in denial. And I feel like there's some truth to that. But the Wakefields take it like, way beyond anything that seems normal, sane, or even like makes sense in a context of reality.
Creepy, great to have you on here, and all we can do is hopefully one day I'll find a list about the craziest stories that ever happened in the Babysitters Club series.
Yeah, that's another one that went off the rails a few times too.